Introduction. Cascading Style Sheets (CSS) is a cornerstone technology used by most websites. CSS Grid is a powerful tool for creating flexible, responsive designs. It allows for easy layout of complex designs. Understanding CSS Grid. CSS Grid layout is a two-dimensional grid-based layout system. Aims to change the way we design user interfaces. Elements adjust their size and position based on their container's size. How to create a CSS grid. Define a container element as a grid with the display grid property. Direct children of the container become grid items. Example, container display grid, defining grid columns and rows. Define the grid columns and rows with grid template columns and grid template rows properties. Example creates a grid with 3 200px columns and 2 150px rows. Example.container display grid, grid template columns 200px, 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 grid template rows 150px, 150px. Positioning grid items. Grid items are automatically placed in the grid in the order they appear in the source code. Control their position using the grid column and grid row properties. Example positions an item at the second column and second row. Example.item grid column 2, grid row 2. Common error-prone cases and how to avoid them. Common mistake, forgetting to define a grid container before positioning grid items. Solution, always define a grid container with display grid. Common mistake, using CSS Grid features with browser versions that do not support them. Solution, always check browser compatibility when planning to use CSS Grid. Tips and tricks. Use the FR unit for flexible grid layouts. Use the repeat function to define grid columns and rows more succinctly. Use grid template areas and grid area to create complex layouts with named areas. Conclusion. CSS Grid is a powerful tool that simplifies the process of creating complex layouts. It requires a learning curve but makes CSS cleaner, more understandable, and easier to maintain.